Most people who struggle with tomatoes are not doing it wrong in July or August. They are doing it wrong on the day they plant. Every mistake that produces a disappointing harvest, the stunted plants, the blossom drop, the blossom end rot, the disease that creeps up the lower leaves and ruins the plant by midsummer, almost always traces back to a decision made in the first 30 minutes of planting day. The 15 tips in this video are in the exact order they matter. Follow them in sequence and you will produce more tomatoes from the same space with the same amount of effort than you have ever grown before. Miss the first 3 and everything after them underperforms. This is the system. Let's build it. The single most important thing you will do before a tomato plant ever goes in the ground costs $3 and takes 30 seconds. Push a soil thermometer 2 to 3 inches into the ground where you plan to plant. Read the number. Tomatoes need a soil temperature of at least 60 degrees Fahrenheit at planting time, not air temperature, soil temperature. On a warm May day when the air is 70 degrees and the sun is bright, the soil 2 inches down may still read 52 degrees. The tomato transplanted into 52-degree soil does not grow. It stalls. Its roots sit cold and dormant while the leaves above ground look fine. Meanwhile, your neighbor who waited one more week and planted into 62-degree soil will have plants that overtake yours within 3 weeks and produce their first ripe fruit ahead of you. The University of Minnesota Extension documents that tomato plants transplanted into insufficiently warm soil do not produce earlier harvests than those planted later into properly warmed ground. Every day you wait for soil to hit 60 degrees is not a day lost. It is a day invested in the harvest that follows. If you cannot wait and want to accelerate soil warming, lay black plastic mulch over the planting area 10 to 14 days before your intended planting date. Black plastic absorbs heat from sunlight and transfers it directly into the soil beneath. Cornell University Garden-Based Learning confirms that black plastic mulch measurably improves yield, advances first harvest timing, and maintains soil moisture simultaneously. Cut X-shaped slits through the plastic on planting day, plant directly through them, and leave the plastic in place all season. This technique is not experimental. It is documented and widely used in commercial tomato production precisely because it works. Before the plant goes in the hole, do something that will change the performance of every tomato you grow for the rest of your gardening life. Harden it off correctly. Hardening off is the process of acclimatizing a seedling that has been grown indoors or in a greenhouse to outdoor conditions before transplanting. Skipping this step or rushing it is one of the most common causes of transplant shock, which delays first harvest by 2 to 3 weeks, 7 to 10 days before your intended planting date. Begin setting plants outside in a sheltered spot with indirect light for 2 to 3 hours on day 1. Add 1 to 2 hours of exposure each day, gradually introducing them to direct sun. By day 7, they should be spending the full day outdoors, including direct afternoon sun. Transplant them on a cloudy day or in the evening, never during peak afternoon sun on a hot day, so the roots have hours to settle before the full solar load hits the leaves. This one protocol consistently produces stronger, faster establishing plants than any other pre-planting step you can take. Now you are ready to plant, and the way you put a tomato in the ground determines whether the root system that supports the entire season is ordinary or exceptional. Tomatoes are one of the only vegetables on earth that grow roots along any part of the stem that is buried underground. A tomato buried deep develops an entirely larger, more extensive root system than one planted at pot depth. More roots mean more water and nutrient uptake, more drought resilience, and stronger overall plant structure. Remove all leaves from the bottom 2/3 of the stem before planting. Dig a hole deep enough that only the top third of the plant, the top cluster of leaves, remains above soil. Backfill and firm the soil around the stem. The portion of stem you just buried will develop adventitious roots within 10 to 14 days, and the plant you planted will become functionally 2 to 3 times larger underground than the one you took out of the pot. If your seedling is very tall and leggy, use the trench method instead. Dig a shallow trench 3 to 4 inches deep and lay the plant horizontally in it, bending the top 6 inches of stem gently upward to remain above ground. Bury the horizontal length of stem. Roots develop the full length of the buried section. The upward bent top adjusts to vertical within days as the plant responds to the light. Cornell University documents that staked and pruned plants set this way can reach well over 6 feet in a favorable growing season. Before you close the planting hole, add bone meal to the bottom. A tablespoon of bone meal worked into the soil at the base of each planting hole provides phosphorus, the nutrient that drives root development and flower formation. The Old Farmer's Almanac specifically recommends bone meal at planting as a phosphorus source and warns explicitly against high nitrogen fertilizers at this stage. Here is exactly why that matters. Nitrogen drives leaf and stem growth. Phosphorus drives root and flower development. A tomato plant that receives high nitrogen at planting produces lush, beautiful, dark dark green foliage and almost no fruit. Every gardener who has grown a tomato plant that looked magnificent and produced nothing has almost certainly overfed it with nitrogen. Bone meal at planting. Switch to high-potassium fertilizer when fruit sets. That is the sequence. Follow it exactly. Space your plants correctly and do not negotiate with this tip. Staked indeterminate varieties need 18 to 24 inches between plants. Caged or ground-growing plants need 24 to 36 inches. Rows should be 48 to 72 inches apart, according to University of Arkansas Extension documentation. Crowded tomatoes do three things. They block sunlight from reaching developing fruit, which slows ripening. They restrict airflow between plants, which creates the humid conditions that fungal diseases require to establish, and they force root systems to compete for the same soil moisture and nutrients in the zone between plants. Every inch of space you give a tomato plant beyond the minimum recommended pays back in disease resistance, fruit quality, and total yield across the season. Put your support system in the ground on planting day, not next week, not when the plant starts to lean, on the day you plant. Every experienced tomato grower knows this, and every first-year tomato grower learns it the hard way. When they push a stake into summer soil next to a large established plant, and sever roots in the process. The root system of an established tomato plant extends outward from the stem, and a stake driven in at the wrong time causes invisible damage that shows up as wilting and stalled growth a week later. A stake or cage installed at planting time, when the root system is small and shallow, does no damage and will support the plant through its entire growth arc. For indeterminate varieties that will exceed 6 feet, use a wooden stake at least 6 feet tall, driven 12 inches into the ground. Attach the main stem loosely at 12 to 14 inch intervals as it grows using soft ties, strips of cloth, or twist ties. Never use wire against the stem directly. Within the first 2 weeks after planting, remove every leaf that is within 12 inches of the soil surface. This is one of the most consistently effective disease prevention techniques available to home tomato growers, and one of the most underused. Tomato blight, septoria leaf spot, and early blight almost always begin in the lower leaves. The mechanism is soil splash. Rain or overhead watering propels soil droplets containing fungal spores upward onto low-hanging leaves. Once fungal disease establishes in the lower foliage, it moves progressively upward through the plant season by season. Clearing the bottom 12 inches of leaves eliminates the entry point. No low leaves, no soil splash. Dramatically reduced early disease pressure. It takes 5 minutes per plant at planting time, and it changes the health trajectory of the entire plant for the season. Water at the soil level, always, and never from above. A soaker hose or a watering can directed at the base of each plant keeps the foliage dry. Wet foliage is an invitation for fungal disease to establish. Overhead sprinklers produce exactly the soil splashing mechanism that spreads early blight and septoria. If you have been watering from overhead and experiencing persistent foliar disease on your tomatoes, this is the likely cause. The correction is immediate and costs nothing. Move the water delivery to soil level and keep it there all season. Tomatoes need 1 inch of water per week during the growing season, delivered deeply rather than frequently. A light daily watering that wets only the top 2 inches of soil trains roots to stay shallow, looking for moisture. A deep watering twice per week that penetrates 12 to 18 inches encourages roots to follow the moisture downward, producing a deeper root system that buffers the plant against surface heat and short dry spells. The University of Arkansas Extension recommends watering every 2 to 4 days during dry periods for in-ground plants and daily for container plants. The difference between shallow frequent and deep infrequent watering is not just water efficiency, it is the difference between a plant that wilts every afternoon in July and one that stands upright and keeps producing through the hottest weeks of the summer. Apply mulch after the soil has warmed, not immediately at planting. This is the detail that defeats the purpose of mulching for most gardeners who apply it too early. Mulch insulates the soil temperature. Applied in May, before the soil has warmed, it holds the cold in and slows the warming process the plant needs. Once your soil has reached 60 to 65 degrees and planting is complete, apply 3 to 4 inches of straw, shredded leaves, or grass clippings around each plant, keeping mulch 2 inches away from the stem itself to prevent stem rot. From that point, mulch does 3 things simultaneously. It retains soil moisture, reducing how frequently you need to water. It suppresses weeds that compete with roots, and it prevents the soil splash that spreads foliar disease. For indeterminate varieties only, sucker removal removal redirects the plant's energy from producing dozens of vegetative branches toward producing fruit on the branches that already exist. A sucker is the shoot that emerges in the junction between the main stem and a side branch called the axil. Left to grow, every sucker becomes a full branch with its own suckers, producing an exponentially expanding bush that puts enormous energy into vegetation rather than fruit. Remove suckers when they are 1 to 2 inches long by pinching them off between your fingers. Do not cut them. Cuts create wounds that require healing resources. A clean pinch at the small size seals almost immediately. Remove suckers every 5 to 7 days throughout the growing season. Limit indeterminate plants to 1 or 2 main stems. Cornell University Extension notes that staked and pruned plants produce larger individual fruits and earlier first harvest, though total season yield may be slightly lower than an unpruned bush. For most home gardeners who want consistent, manageable, high-quality production through summer, single or double stem pruning is the correct approach. Do not sucker cherry tomatoes. Cherry tomato varieties benefit from the bush structure that suckering would eliminate. Allow them to develop freely and provide a large cage that contains the spread. When the first fruits reach the size of a golf ball, switch your fertilizer. Everything up to this point has been building the plant structure. From this point forward, the plant's job is producing fruit. Nitrogen is no longer your friend. The Old Farmer's Almanac and Cornell University Extension both specifically warn against high nitrogen fertilization once fruit is developing, because it pushes the plant back into vegetative growth at the expense of fruit maturity. Switch to a high-potassium fertilizer, a tomato-specific formula with an NPK ratio where the third number, potassium, is the highest. Apply every 2 to 3 weeks following the package directions. Potassium drives sugar production in fruit, thickens cell walls which reduces cracking, and supports the vascular transport system that moves water and nutrients into developing tomatoes. Blossom end rot is the black, sunken, leathery spot that develops on the bottom of tomatoes before they ripen. It is not a disease, it is a calcium deficiency specifically in the fruit tissue caused by inconsistent soil moisture that disrupts the plant's ability to transport calcium from the soil into developing fruit, even when adequate calcium is present in the soil. The solution is not adding calcium supplements to the soil in most cases. It is consistent moisture. Every deep watering session should deliver water slowly enough that the soil absorbs it rather than running off. Mulch maintains the moisture consistency between watering sessions. If blossom end rot appears despite consistent watering, a foliar calcium spray applied directly to the developing fruit clusters delivers calcium to the fruit tissue directly, bypassing the moisture-dependent soil transport system. The tip that surprises almost every gardener who hears it for the first time is this: pick your tomatoes before they are fully ripe. When a tomato reaches what growers call the breaker stage, the point at which the green color begins to lighten, and the first blush of color appears at the blossom end, the fruit has already produced all the sugars and flavor compounds it will ever contain. Ripening after this point is a process of pigment development that happens equally well on the vine or on a kitchen counter. Picking at the breaker stage and ripening indoors at room temperature away from direct sunlight does 4 things that picking at full ripeness does not. It prevents the cracking that happens when a fully ripe tomato absorbs sudden moisture from rain. It beats every pest and bird that is waiting for peak ripeness. It redirects the plant's energy from supporting fully ripe fruit toward developing the flowers and small fruit that will constitute your next wave of harvest, and it allows you to harvest and ripen at your own pace rather than the tomato's pace. Do not refrigerate tomatoes at any ripening stage. Cold temperatures below 50 degrees Fahrenheit permanently damage the flavor compounds in tomato tissue and produce the flavorless, mealy texture that makes supermarket tomatoes disappointing. At the end of summer, when the first frost is approaching and you have tomatoes still on the vine in various stages, pick everything including the fully green ones. Green tomatoes picked when they have reached mature size, which you can determine by firmness and the absence of the seed jelly inside when cut, will ripen to good flavor on a windowsill at room temperature. University of Arkansas Extension confirms that tomatoes picked with decreasing green color, even those just beginning to turn white or cream at the blossom end, will ripen to satisfactory eating quality indoors. Only tomatoes picked truly and fully green before any color change has begun may not ripen to their full flavor potential. In the final weeks before frost, pick daily, bring everything in, and let your kitchen windowsill do the work. The vine no longer has time to finish. 15 tips. Soil temperature verified before planting. Hardening off done correctly over 7 to 10 days. Deep planting with 2/3 of the stem buried. Bone meal in the hole. High potassium fertilizer later. Correct spacing enforced. Stakes and cages installed at planting. Lower 12 inches of foliage removed within 2 weeks. Watering at soil level, 1 inch per week deeply. Mulch applied after soil warming. Suckers removed every 5 to 7 days on indeterminate varieties. varieties, fertilizer switched to potassium at golf ball fruit size, consistent moisture maintained to prevent blossom end rot, tomatoes picked at the breaker stage and ripened indoors, end of season green fruit harvested and ripened on the windowsill. Every one of these tips is documented by university extension programs across the United States and verifiable in the published literature of Cornell, Minnesota and Arkansas cooperative extensions. Apply all 15 and your tomato plants this May will perform differently than any you have grown before. Not because the plants are different, because the decisions you made in the first 30 minutes changed everything that followed.